Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 8th workshop of Kepler's Harmonies. We are going to begin, as promised, to read the very last chapter on sublunary nature today. We won't get it done, I don't think, I doubt, but we will get it halfway through at the very least. And next week, I imagine we're gonna finish it. Like usual, I prepared a couple of remarks, a couple of images, and I want to show a little video just to sort of situate people's minds in a place where they're going to better recognize a lot of the concepts that Kepler is going to weave in a tapestry for us in the coming reading. So has anybody, just out of curiosity, has anybody read ahead and read through this chapter? No? Okay.
No idea. Not a clue.
All right. We're all holding hands and venturing into the unknown together. That's good. All right. So let me do a little share screen. So first, I'm going to just show a few images. Do people see my screen share?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So the full title, ignoring the typo in my slide, is Epilogue on the sublunary nature and on the inferior faculties of the soul, especially those on which astrology depends. Chapter 7, Book 4. And sorry, I'm super sick today. It's probably only going to get worse for the coming few days. So if I have to tap out, I'm going to ask somebody else to sort of read. Well, actually, you know what? Yeah, that's actually why it's really good that I picked a couple of videos that's going to give me a bit of a chance to take a step back and just listen to Michael Claridge, a fantastic scientist who did something really good that I think Kepler would love if he were alive in the flesh today. So first up, some of the concepts that we're going to look at are the following. At least for the first half of this last chapter, Kepler is going to deal implicitly with two different concepts of causation. One might be called mechanic causation, and the other one dynamic causation. He's going to introduce astroclimatology. I believe this is probably the earliest rigorous introduction to astroclimatology that is known to man. Everything sort of builds up. Kepler not only introduced quantum mechanics from a very principled standpoint with his essay on the six-sided snowflake and the substructure of matter, such that our eyes perceive the growth of matter in the form of these geometrical proportions. That was highly influential in opening up the space of the quantum domain that influenced people like Max Planck, Wilhelm Weber on his electrodynamics and other things. So we're going to look at some of Kepler's pioneering work on astroclimatology. That's going to come up, and metaphysically on the question of the universal spirit, that's going to also come up. Is our universe governed by the principle of death? Is that the norm and the standard by which everything must be judged? Or is there a principle of life ultimately governing the universe and all that is within it? Very, very, very important concepts. So just as a refresher, earlier on, a few readings ago, I believe it was probably chapter 3, I believe, maybe chapter 2 of this book of the Harmonies, Kepler, when dealing with the schism of paradigms shaping the two different currents of so-called Western science coming out of the ancient Greeks, he correctly identifies this schism located between the school of thought that presumes the existence of a soul, an immortal soul, in animating all living beings, and with the highest quality of soul. Later on, this term became a Leibnizian monad, in the form of human beings who could be self-aware, use choice, use conscience. We're creature, the species that wills, that plans, that thinks in ways that we don't find that power expressed in that same way, on that same magnitude in the other species of the biosphere. One being Plato, the other one being the no-soul school of Aristotle, who presumed the existence of the blank slate, the tabula rasa, upon which all can be written by whoever controls the definitions and the norms of the society in which babies are born. Two very different ways of thinking about education, governance, obviously, and science. And Plato, Kepler takes his stand, and he's probably more clear than any other scientist that I know of this age when he says, where he, Aristotle, draws a universal conclusion and convicts Plato of the stupidity which is his own fantasy. And finally, where the Platonic picture of the self-taught slave, he opposes a contrary picture of his own, asserting that the mind in itself is empty not only of other knowledge and of mathematical categories, but also of species, and is just like a blank sheet, so that nothing is written on it, but everything can be written on it. From this aspect, I say, he is not to be tolerated in the Christian religion. Bold, bold statement. Very bold. And this isn't coming from just any old philosopher. This is coming from the man who discovered several major planetary laws of motion and a lot more. So this carries weight. So first concept, two causations. Just want to give people a quick sense, because this is going to come up. Sometimes the language that Kepler uses might cause people to fall off. So I just want it to be clear first before we see how Kepler weaves this. When dealing with anything that involves a question of why or how or what happened, right, in the material world, our mind is provoked by something that catches our attention, an anomaly, and we ask the question, what happened? What made this happen? More importantly, why did this happen? So the mechanical causation would be described as, something A, the mover, moves the moved. So, you got a cause and effect. I guess people could probably think of a simple example just to put some meat on the bones of that. Anybody want to just throw out one quick example of something practically that does this? Anything at all. And everyone's on mute.
Start the car and then you drive down the road.
Bam. Okay, that's it. So what
party?
caused the car to drive down the road? You started it up. You started the engine, and then you drove. Cause effect. Right. Turn the key. Ignition.
I was thinking of wind and weather.
Wind and weather. Go on. Explain just a little bit more.
Well, wind, blowing things, for example, there is an obvious principle of cause and effect there.
You mean the rotation of the Earth? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of implications from that simple statement, but just a basic one: wind and weather.
Yeah, heat emanating through space from suns, from other, well, especially our sun, causing heat to hit. Heat has an effect with cold, right? The particles move. We have all sorts of interesting phenomena that occurs as far as what we call weather. So that's true, right? So the simple answer would be, what causes the car to move? It would be the engine starting. That's the cause, and then the effect. What causes the weather? Well, Earth rotating causes wind. You call it weather. Okay, so that's the mechanical causation. The dynamic causation is not so stark and strict in the lines of division. The mover, let's say you're dealing with the sun causing heat and a certain gravitational field inducing the momentum of different planetary bodies around it, and that we experience in the form of wind. Well, that would be, mover would be the planet or the sun, or in this case, the sun would be the mover. The planet would be moved. The wind would be the effect. But the moved is also itself a cause and an effect. So the sun is not its own cause, because what is the sun a part of? Maybe for a while people thought it was its own thing and the whole universe revolved around the sun, maybe. But now we know that the sun is part of a galaxy, right? It's an integral part of the galaxy. So what allows the sun to stay hot? If we know that if you light a match in space, it's not going to last long. Fire doesn't last long in the cold vacuum of space. So what allows that big ball of fire called sun for billions of years, right, to maintain this heat in that cold, vacuous space? Well, maybe it's receiving energy inputs. Maybe there's something internal that we haven't yet discovered within it, right? That's generative. What about the Earth, right? There's heat emanating out of the Earth. What's causing that? Well, shouldn't the maximum cold darkness of space cause a slow death of the Earth's heat over time? But we don't see really any of that evidence. So there's a bit more of a dynamic interplay, right? The planet is itself affected by the mover, the sun, but the sun is also an effect of something else, and the planet affects in turn other things. So there's always a dynamic interplay. Very different idea, more interesting idea in my view.
In essence, are you saying what's causing the cause?
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately the sort of question. Plato's ultimately looking for the satisfying answer, and Kepler's going to recapitulate the way Plato approaches final causes. He doesn't deny it. He doesn't get into an infinite regression of always finding something else forever, which the mechanist would do. They would always be like, oh, there's always something additional that you could always add, so thus there is no truth, there is no cause, and then they get demoralized. But
Right.
Kepler doesn't think that way, neither does Plato, and Plato's going to talk about that. Kepler's going to talk about that. You'll notice
So
that.
So you're saying there's a conjugate between cause and effect, a dynamic conjugate.
Yeah, exactly. So practical example, what would cause pyrite to sometimes take the form over time of an octahedron, and sometimes it would take the form of cubes? It's both pyrite, right? The molecular structure isn't that qualitatively different. So what sort of processes might exist such that these two different effects would occur with the same substance?
Maybe temperature, cooling.
Temperature, cooling, pressure. Yeah, those might be factors. I agree with you.
Changes in electromagnetic contours.
I think so too. That probably comes into play everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe there's some isotopic differences with the molecules of the pyrite that might be slightly different in that cause the bonding, the electrical bonding to occur as they slowly grow from the very small and express themselves on the macro level. That could be probably a factor.
Or maybe the chemical properties of the matrix that it's forming in.
Yep.
Yeah,
totally. All of these things are probably playing a role. Also, just the fabric of physical space-time itself has a certain structure that Kepler demonstrated through his nesting of the solids, the five Platonic solids. So that's there's something outside of, but probably also inside of that outside exerting influence upon these the molecules as they grow, right? So you have an external cause, but also an internal cause as far as the internal growth that we already alluded to in a variety of variables. So that's same thing for the question of like the six-sided snowflakes, right? They're all different, right? But they're all H2O that it starts experiencing temperatures that are below 0 Celsius, and then they start forming these very interesting but different geometries, which is just gorgeous, super gorgeous. It says something as well, I think, about the external and internal structures. And then in life, this Dia's photograph that I just received an hour ago. Fantastic photographs, Dia. They're really nice.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Yeah. And this just shows, like the Pentagon is something which really only crops up in the presence of living matter in general. However, we will find at the extremes of the so-called non-living the appearance of the Pentagon and fivefold symmetries too. But we tend to find them, as Kepler pointed out, in the geometrical relationships where the Pentagon plays a very important role in the Keplerian model, both in the harmonic but also in the nested solids in this mysterium, as creating the space or explaining the space between the sphere inscribed within the Earth's boundary condition and outside of the Earth's boundary condition, right? You have the icosahedron dodecahedron nesting outside of and inside the Earth being the most clear expression of life of all of the known planets. Also an interesting fact that those two shapes alone of all the Platonic solids utilize the golden section, which is at the heart of the creation of the Pentagon. So that's an interesting phenomenon. But again, the question is always like, well, why this shape and not some other shape? Kepler will also do something that Leonardo da Vinci is doing, Plato had done, by introducing the question of different qualities of life, and how if life is universal in that there could be no place where there would be no presence of life as an active power, in that case, must not the planets and the shape and behavior of the planets and all that is within them, and he's going to specifically speak about the Earth, sublunary natures, that which is below the moon, right? So everything on the Earth and within the Earth, must there not be some principle of life as well? And we find in, anybody who's been on YouTube or Telegram has probably encountered these beautiful fractal-like geometries that express themselves in the growth functions of trees, the lungs of the Earth, of the biosphere, as that obviously you'd have to be blind not to see certain parallels in the construction of the human lungs. On the left-hand side is what we've got as an X-ray of human lungs. We've got these beautiful similar patterns as well in the form of river systems, forming themselves over time, forming, again, very living fractal-like geometries. Gorgeous stuff on the small as on the large. There we have some lightning as well, leaf veins, trees with roots. Another image here of blood capillaries, river deltas. Another image from a satellite of river deltas. Some snowy place. So you got this obvious common principle that Kepler is spending a lot of time looking at. Da Vinci was too in his codexes. Last week I alluded to Robert Moon, and I'm only going to go through what Robert Moon actually discovered next week. So I'm going to just leave it there. But Robert Moon made the point when he discovered a certain Keplerian ordering of the periodic table of elements, the Mendeleev table. He had a flash of insight that explained more perfectly why the elements fall the way they do periodically than any other model that had ever hitherto been generated, which has even been perfected more recently by some scientists still alive. So we're going to look at that next week. But first, I want to play a 12-minute video by Michael Claridge, and then we'll jump into the reading. So let me do a stop share. And I'm going to do a reshare. This screen thingamajig. Use this one. Okay. I think everyone here has probably seen Dr. Michael Claridge in action at the Rising Tide Foundation seminars or somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nathan hasn't. Okay. This is going to be a treat. Michael Claridge is he's a lead scientist for the Sapphire Project, a very, very important pathway to nuclear fusion that's breaking all the laws of standard model physics. Gorgeous project. And so he's given us a few lectures already. He's a good friend, and he made this little video for the Thunderbolts project, which is great. This called the Solar System as an Electrical Transformer. So yeah, let's just play that. I hope the sound is going to be high enough.
On planets, including the Earth, to the enigmatic behaviors of comets, to the ongoing puzzles of the sun. The evidence for the electrical connectedness throughout the solar system grows with each new discovery. In recent decades, the discovery of completely baffling exoplanet systems have led some astronomers to acknowledge the need for a whole new theory of planet and star formation. Today, Dr. Michael Claridge, a scientist on the Sapphire Project team, proposes a foundation for a new model of the solar system based on the principles of electrical engineering.
Our understanding of our solar system has changed so much in the past few decades that I am standing back more often and asking myself, well, what is the solar system? What are all these planets? What about all these other planetary systems that the Kepler telescope has discovered? Thousands of star systems, each with their own planets. Many of those star systems are a surprise to contemporary astrophysics because a lot of them do not look very much like our solar system. Before we had any idea what other star systems looked like, we assumed, as is reasonable, that other solar systems would all look like ours. That turns out not to be the case. Some stars have giant planets orbiting very close to them. Binary star systems have planets, which, when I was in school, was explained to us how that would not be possible. One system discovered has a planet that takes tens of thousands of years to orbit. As we collect more data about star systems, we need to open our minds to what the data is telling us. Many astronomers were actually surprised that other stars are surrounded by planets. Myself and many others had the opposite response. I would have been very surprised if we found that other stars were not surrounded by planets. I'm not surprised because of my understanding of what is a star and what is a solar system. Consider this diagram. I did not invent this diagram. It is part of very old cosmological systems. It is a factual diagram. We know all about the existence of cells, people, planets, stellar systems, galaxies. But the diagram is more than facts. It conveys relationship. It conveys an emotional knowledge. The facts are arranged, so to speak, underneath a larger idea. Each of these entities on the diagram is part of a larger world and is composed of smaller worlds. When facts are arranged under a larger truth, then we can understand the facts. One meaning of understanding is when facts stand under a larger truth. If we are going to understand the data we are gathering about different kinds of planetary systems, we will need to also understand the functions of such systems in the larger world of the galaxy. If we don't understand the various roles star systems can play in the galactic world, then we will never be able to understand what is a solar system. To explore that statement further, we can look in the other direction in the diagram and ask about cells. You and I have the benefit of knowing a lot about cells, but in 1860, when the leading naturalist of the day, Ernst Haeckel, was asked, should young naturalists study cells, he answered, absolutely not. They are uninteresting blobs of protoplasm. There is nothing useful to be learned. He said that in part because of his cosmology, in which cells played no part, so he had no way of understanding what he was looking at. A lot has been learned since 1860, and now we know so much about cells that it takes years of study to get a grasp of how many different kinds of cells there are and all the different functions they play in the body of an animal. Each cell in your body performs very important functions. There are no cells in your body that have no function. Coming back to the cosmological diagram, if one starts with the proper cosmology, then one can ask about function, and then one stands a chance of understanding what one is looking at. If we are not asking about function, we will never really know what we are looking at. One of the functions of planets is to transform solar energy, and every planet does it differently. One aspect of such transformation is weather. Every planet has weather, but every planet has very different weather. On Earth, all the solar influences interact with our atmosphere, magnetosphere, lithosphere. That interaction results in lightning, rain, blue skies, white clouds, soft dew that covers your grass in the morning. But the weather on Jupiter is different. But do not think for a moment that the weather on Jupiter is any less intricate than here on Earth. Just as here on Earth weather encompasses the delicate opening of a flower and also the violent explosion of lightning, so also there must be as much variety of gentleness and strength on Jupiter and Saturn and Venus. So even though all the planets share the same sun, the uniqueness of each planet results in different types of transformation of solar energy. Let us take this idea of planets transforming a sun's energy and look at just the electrical aspect of that. Let us look at the entire solar system as an electrical transformer. This is a beautiful sketch of our solar system. The sun is at the center. The entire body of the system is moving through the galaxy, and each planet is revolving around the sun at a different speed. This picture is not to scale, but it gives you a good feeling for the solar system as coils within coils. Think of the planets not as points in space, but think of what their orbits look like over the span of hundreds or thousands of years. Picture not the planet, but the orbit of the planet. And picture that orbit as a wire, which is electrically conductive and can be a part of an electrical circuit. This is not so far from what we know, as each planet is surrounded by highly conductive plasmas. Most of the planets in our solar system have strong magnetic fields, which means there are strong electric currents flowing in and out of the planets. We know that the Earth has regularly about 10 million amperes flowing in and out at the poles at any given time. Here's the same sketch of our solar system from a different point of view. As centuries of our Earth years go by, the inner planets will take many turns around the sun. The outer planets will make fewer turns. In our solar system, seen as coils of wire, the inner planets make many turns around the sun, while the outer planets are wound fewer times. Taking the planets Mercury through Neptune, we see there are 8 coils around the central primary of the sun. The outer coil of Neptune goes round the sun every 165 years. In that time, the other planets will orbit the sun these number of times. In that time, Mercury will go around 684 times, Venus 268 times, and so on. Now, the image I'm describing is well known to every electrical engineer, that of a center core alternating current electrical transformer. The solar system as an electrical transformer is an idea we need to explore if we are going to understand functions. Since Michael Faraday's time, we have learned much about electrical transformers. Electrical transformers is an idea that everyone should try to know something about. It will change the way you see the world. In 1830, Michael Faraday discovered something that completely changed our world. He showed the first examples of electromagnetic induction. This picture is one of the Faraday's original coils. This is an iron ring. You can see the black iron underneath the coils. Around that soft iron ring, he wound wire in 2 sections. On the left, covering a little more than half the ring, is one section of wire coming in on the upper left and winding around the iron ring about 100 times and then leaving. On the right of the ring, there's another wire coming in, winding round, then leaving. The surprise, the magic that changed all of human history, was the finding that if you quickly surge current through the left wire, that induces a surge of current in the wire on the right. In the world of electricity and magnetism, changes that take place in one location will cause changes in another location by induction. Changes in one place induce changes in another place. We will look at just one more idea from transformer theory, and then we will turn our attention back to stars and planets. This idea is that of a step-up or step-down transformation of electrical activity. Here is a more schematic drawing of Faraday's induction experiment. Notice on the left, the wire wraps around the core twice as much as on the right. Because of this, voltage changes on the left will induce voltage on the right that is only half as strong. Because the induced voltage changes on the right side are only half of those on the left, this is called a step-down transformer. Voltages are stepped down because there are fewer turns of the coil on the right. The ratio of the voltage fluctuations on each side is the ratio of the number of turns the wire makes around the core. If the left-hand side had 100 times the number of turns on the right, then whatever voltage fluctuations came in on the left would induce 1/100th the size fluctuations on the right. Now, I know the electrical engineers in the audience are miles ahead of my explanation, but at least we're all at a similar starting point. So now take the idea of electrical transformer and bring it to the level of stars and planets. In this picture, the sun is the driving force, the primary coil. The sun is constantly sending out voltage and current fluctuations. These induce voltage and current fluctuations around the Earth and each planet. Now, this is an observed fact. It is not some fanciful theory. For example, planets with strong magnetic fields like Jupiter and Earth take X-ray emissions from the surface of the sun and transform those into radio emissions around the planet's equator. Here are low-frequency radio emissions around Jupiter resulting from different fluxes of very high-frequency X-rays emitted from the sun.
In part 2 of this presentation, Dr. Claridge will further develop the idea of the solar system as a center core electrical transformer, and also show the
Yeah, I've got a someone should probably help him make some diagrams of what he sketched out. But beyond that, it really blew me away. Just his quality of integrated thinking. And I think I'm gonna, just in listening to this again, I'm gonna ask him to do a presentation for us, unpacking this in further detail. But this is the thing, right? If you look at even Kepler, among the many destructive things that was done by the Newtonian cult, this creation of the brand of Newton over the centuries, is this idea of magnetism, which Kepler, as Kepler says in his New Astronomy, when he was discovering the first and second laws of planetary motion, he never used the word gravity. There's no idea of a force pulling and pushing as an efficient cause unto itself, but he's always looking at the magnetic influence and the harmonic pathways within magnetic fields that would then account for the physical reasons why planets move around a sun the way they do. And he says, therefore, this is Kepler, as the sun forever turns on itself, the motive force, or the motive force, motive, right? Intention, force, or the outflowing of the species from the sun's magnetic fibers diffused through all the distances of the planets also rotates in an orb and does so in the same time as the sun. Just as when a magnet is moved about, the magnetic power is also moved, and the iron along with it flowing the magnetic force. So that's Kepler. That's the quality of thinking that we're dealing. So it's not just the guy who's thinking about the musicality of space-time, but he's really into the matter of electricity and magnetism as getting us closer to the nexus of causation. I think at this point, it would be good to just read a little bit. Does anybody have any thoughts before we jump into the reading? Yeah. Kepler's, you're going to see why Kepler's completely on this page. So let's just do that. Share screen. Uh-oh. Give me 1 second. I've misplaced it. Oh, I know where it is. Okay.
It's page 350.
Yeah, I had the PDF up, and then I have too many windows, and then I got confused and lost track. So let me just share this thing. It's got to be in here. There it is. Okay. So, who would like to be a slow reader for today? I say slow because there's a lot of dense ideas, as always. Not judging your intelligence at all. I can't read. My throat's all messed up.
Tired. I'm pooped.
Okay, you're pooped too. Okay, all right.
I'll read. What page do I go to? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine. Can you see the screen?
I just read from the book because I can't read the screen. It's on the phone.
Oh, you bought the book. Oh, good for you. Yeah. So
Just downloaded it. It was free.
Yeah. That's good. 358.
358. Okay. Okay, somebody else read. I don't know where the heck my book is. I've been
That's okay. That's all right.
moving things around in here quite a bit.
Paul, can you hear?
Yeah, look, yeah, I'll happily read, but can you make the font a little bit bigger?
Yes, sir. How's that?
Yeah, that's fine. That's excellent. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, from the top, chapter 7, Epilogue on sublunary nature and on the inferior faculties of the soul. especially those on which astrology depends. Much has been said about this study in the second chapter, much in the whole of this book 4, and something also in book 3, and a year ago in the Prolegomena to the Ephemerides, and in book 1 of my Epitome of Copernican Astronomy, page 125. Again, in the year 1610, in my A Third Party Interposes, numbers 40 to 43 and 59 to 72 and 113, and so on. And in my reply to the objections of Rosalind, and in the year 1606 in my book On the New Star, chapters 8, 9, 10, and 14, and 18, especially, 28 rather, especially from pages 171 to 175. And in the year 1604, in my optical part of astronomy, pages 27 and 26 rather, and 27 and page 224. For I deliberately pass over the prognostic signs, which I have from time to time stated as preface or as interpolations from the more certain foundations of astrology. However, since I have seemed to some very celebrated professors of philosophy and medicine to be founding a new philosophy, and that a very true one, the tender little plant must be cherished and reared with every care, as must all its innovations, so that it may set its roots in the minds of those who practice philosophy, and not be choked by the excessive watering of vain sophistry, nor washed out by torrents of popular fancies, or siphon in the frosts of public neglect. I love the way they write. Mm-hmm. I mean, most of us would write, one sentence there rather than 5 different descriptions. Mm-hmm. If I achieve caution against that, I have no fear for its being broken by the winds of misrepresentation, and none for its being burnt away by the sun of substantial criticism. Since then, in chapter 1, I did indeed touch on the essence of the soul, but only on account of the harmonies. And since the second chapter is not avowedly about the soul, but about the harmonies on account of the soul, I am now pleased in this chapter to discuss the soul on its own account, a little more generally, and pleased to make from the epilogue a summary of everything which relates to the present subject, and here to bring within a single view what has been said here and there, and in passing, and cryptically, and to expound the whole nature of the matter in a single scheme of discourse. The view that there is some soul of the whole universe directing the motions of the stars, the generation of the elements, the conservation of living creatures and plants, and finally the mutual sympathy of things above and below, is defended from the Pythagorean beliefs by Timaeus of Locri in Plato. Proclus, in fact, confirmed it in various places, including the words which I transcribed in chapter 1 of this book 4. They made it something different from the mind. Whereas the mind was simple, this soul was manifold in its faculties. And whereas the ideas of all sensible things were at first in the mind on their own account, pure and identical, they were in the soul secondarily, because of the mind, and taken from it as they inclined more towards matter. Hence, using the distinction between the names, they called those which were indeed intellectual or mental patterns, but those which were spiritual, the images of those patterns. What it amounts to is a Christian can easily understand by the Platonic mind, God the Creator, and by the soul, the nature of things. Can I just ask a quick question, Matthew? Would it be wrong to, in that sentence where it says, using the distinction between the names, they called those which were indeed intellectual or mental patterns, but those which were spiritual, the images of those patterns, would we be dealing with something similar there to Platonic forms?
I think so. Quan, what do you think? I'd like to hear what Quan has to say.
Oh, I just say amen to that, because it is obviously clear that Kepler is a pure Platonist.
Yeah. I'm just reading it, and I'm trying to follow it as best I can and understand it. And the word Platonic forms came in as I read that sentence. Anyway, let me continue.
Yeah, I think you're right.
What it amounts to is that the Christian can easily understand by the Platonic mind, God the Creator, and by the soul, the nature of things. By what winds of contemplation they were driven to arrive at these doctrines, I leave it to others to hammer out. I shall speak for myself. And first indeed on the soul of the whole universe, though I raise no opposition, yet I shall say nothing in this book 4. For it seems that, if there is some such thing, it resides in the centre of the world, which for me is the sun, and from there it is propagated over the length and breadth of it by the agency of the rays of light, which are equivalents to spirits in the animate body. I'll make a little comment on that one too, just that last sentence. Watching the Michael Claridge video before, Matthew, I was reminded of one that Michael made a while ago that was to do with biophotons within the body.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and just reading that sentence, it's funny the way these things pop into your mind, doesn't it? There is propagated over the length and breadth of it by the agency of rays of light, which are equivalent to spirits in the animate body. And I just immediately thought, biophotons. Anyway.
That's a great thought. No, because if it's been proven, and it has, and Michael Claridge demonstrates that every single cell is emitting and receiving specific frequencies of light as a means of communicating information and regulating our vast flux of change going on in our body and every organ. So much complexity being like organized by a simple process in a sense, because we have a simple oneness about us. And the same thing could be said about every star having that same sort of property, every galaxy also being a recipient and an emitter of these various frequencies as a means of calibration, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Like every celestial body affects every other celestial body, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I would like to interrupt here by reminding one short sentence by LaRouche, which is a overarching idea. And that sentence is...
Wait, I know. Substance is efficient cause, and cause is efficient substance.
Exactly. Because that is truly an idea with a capital I in the Platonic sense of the fall.
Amen, brother.
Continuing. About nature indeed, which directs the elements, although I call it by the customary epithet sublunary, I began 20 years ago now to reach not dissimilar conclusions. Indeed, I was moved to that, not by reading or admiration of the Platonists, but only and solely by observation of the weather and study of the aspects by which it is excited.
That footnote is crap.
Okay.
That's basically the translator saying Kepler was actually using an Aristotelian method. And shut up. He just banned Aristotle from Christendom.
For I saw that with great consistency, the state of the atmosphere was disturbed whenever planets were either in conjunction or configured in the aspects commonly spoken of by the astrologers. I saw that there was generally calm in the atmosphere if few or no aspects occurred, or if they were quickly completed or concluded. Indeed, I considered that this business should not be considered so lightly as the common herd of forecasters usually does. They portray the influences of the stars as if they were some gods, with power over heaven and earth, carrying out everything at will, totally untroubled by what means they produce any effect, whatever, among us on earth, since they themselves remain in the heaven and do not send down to us anything which is evident to the senses except the shining rays. This is the chief gush of the most horrible superstitions of the astrologers. Yet I do not greatly wonder at the forecasters, a race of men which is generally suited to the popular taste, childish and given to dreaming. It is rather the well-known professors of philosophy who should be blamed, as although they have it from their own Aristotle that the life of animate beings and of planets is fostered by the virtue of the sun, they do not ponder the implication that the virtue of the sun is perceived by those creatures. Philosophy is altogether idle and dozy if it admits of the sun's acting on these lower regions as a sculptor acts on inert matter, although the sun lacks chisels and burins and axes and all corporeal instruments. How much more wide awake than these philosophers is the poet Virgil, and how much wiser?
And you're reading so beautifully, Paul. I love it. It's so great because as a lesson, right, for even our own world, you see a lot of people who have had their eyes opened to the reality of these very ugly conspiracies from the top that have been corralling us into a bad place, and people tend to cast blame. Like what's the cause of all of my problems? It's the great resetters. It's them. And it's like, no, the edict of Shakespeare that the fate is not in our stars, or our fate is not in our stars, but in ourselves. So that we are underlings. It's something Plato's kind of, or Kepler's kind of getting at here as well, right? That that they presume that there's this deterministic power, this force of the planets controlling us as if they were gods, which is how the oligarchy kind of wants to also be portrayed as, where we have no free will, we have no responsibility for the good or for the bad. But the reality is, no, they are responsible. It's true for the bad that they do. We don't want to like not hold the oligarchy or oligarchs accountable for doing evil, but at the same time, the causation also falls upon the people who will let it happen too, right? So it goes both ways. Where's the cause?
Very much so.
We are part of that whole as well. So that means we take a part. We take part in what happens as well.
Yeah.
Instead of being on the outside, and everything affects me because it's all from the outside. Like, it's not like that. We're part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but you have to, I mean, the education system is just deplorable.
I hear you. No, I know. A lot of people don't have a lot of chance.
So
I
many
agree.
more people, more of us.
I agree. A lot of people don't carry nearly as much of the blame. I agree. They didn't have much of a chance. But there's still a little inkling. There's always a little spark of something we could have done better.
Yeah, I agree with that one, Matthew. Most definitely. Anyway, I'll continue. Virgil, and how much wiser? For he does not ascribe everything even to the rain, which is nevertheless a part of matter itself, but compares the bosom of the earth to the thighs of a wife. And indeed, a joyful wife, that is, one who perceives what is happening to her with pleasure and helps her husband with suitable motions. Interesting analogy, that one. All these things are signs of life, and suppose a soul in the body which experiences them. For it would not be easy for the sun, destitute of suitable troops, to invade this citadel of the bowels of the earth, without the cooperation of some kind of soul seated within to collude with the enemy and open the gates to him. You may see many who in fact concede very little to astrology, struggling through neglect of this consideration, as if through sloth. So much so indeed that when I appeared and demonstrated the means by which a change in the weather is the consequence of an aspect, there rose up a celebrated man who, in order to refute me, contended... Sorry, Elizabeth, I got to get rid of your little chat thing there. Where am I? As if through sloth... Just your chat thing came up on my screen and blocked the words. That's so much indeed that when I appeared and demonstrated, there rose up a celebrated man, who in order to refute me, contended with great vehemence that the material of rain was heavenly, which we also ridiculed above on page 327 for the common herd. Yet he did not tell us, even in that case, on what basis it comes about that always when the rays of the planets meet the earth that the rain falls, if the rays of the two planets make an angle of 60 degrees rather than if the angle is 59 or 61. Geometry comes into it again. However, I thought that above all, I should read the 14 books of Count Giovanni Pico Mirandola against astrology and hammer out the reasons which he opposed to each chapter. The effect of that was not only to confirm my condemnation of a great many superstitions, but also to shine new light for me on certain matters, when I exerted my wits to shatter the force of the objections and look more closely into the matter itself. In fact, the effect of that book was in refuting some points to give me confidence in them, though previously the astrologers, by defending them, had diminished my confidence. So it was with the aspects. For on the one hand, I took account of consistent experience, not indeed concentrating in that way on snows in particular, or winds, or thunder, and the other things which astrologers usually predict, but observing in general that the state of the air was disturbed in some way or other if there were aspects. For example, if Mars and Jupiter were in conjunction and were peaceful, if there were not any. On the other hand, I listened to Mirandola when he asked why he should believe that Jupiter and Mars have greater effects when they are seen to be together than when they are separated, seeing that their light is not increased by the conjunction, for they bring the same amount to the combination as they possessed separately. But if planets of different qualities coincided, one seemed rather to be obstructed by the other. Here I say...
One second, I'm just curious. I just want to read this side subtitle. Beware of ambiguity. The aspects are among the causes which contribute to effects in the sky in general. Yet the daily aspects are not the cause for any long part of the year or for its continuous general quality, but they act only on the individual days on which they occur. See below.
Yep.
And then the next section is consideration on the cause
of weather. Here I say, seeking a reply to protect the aspects of which I saw events in the sky to be a consequence. I began to consider more carefully first the former as cause, and then the latter as effect. For the form of an aspect, which makes an aspect out of a random configuration or combination of angles, was a quantity capable of qualities, or rather a relation between such quantities, that is, an entity of reason. Then, for it to set in motion the atmosphere, it had first to move some reason which has in its power either the atmosphere or that by which it is disturbed. At the same time, there was passing before my eyes the comparison between the aspects and the musical consonances which was handed down by Ptolemy, expounded by Cardano, and, too rashly indeed, cast off by Mirandola. By this analogy, I was very greatly assisted in my hunt for the causes. So many objections which Mirandola made to the aspects I saw could also be made to the harmonizing of two voices. Certainly, triple or
probably sesquialterate.
Yeah, you need to move the page up, Matthew.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Where am I?
Sesquialterate, meaning a proportion of 2 to 3.
Yeah, okay. Sesquilaterite. I'm just trying to work out how to pronounce it. Proportion, even between two sounds, does not have any effect in respect of pitch, and yet the sounds are pleasing if they are in triple or sesquialterate proportion, and abhorrent if they are in the sevenfold proportion or that of 7 to 6. Then, since it must be something rational which discriminates triple proportion from sevenfold, that is, the soul which controls the hearing, in the business of radiations, also it must be a rational creature which distinguishes between the chords subtended by 60 degrees and by 59 or 61 degrees. Whether it uses reflection for that purpose, like a man understanding geometry, or whether it gets it from an innate instinct alone, like the forms of plants which keep and always construct the definite number of leaves allocated to them from the very origin of things. In this case, mixture has no power, as the precise mixture has for the measuring out of medicines, nor have the physical instruments, and sounds do not delight, nor rays animate, because they are tuned in that way, as when cold water is mixed with hot, to such an extent that the resulting quality corresponds with the body which is going to wash. For in such mixtures, there is usually a single optimum temperature, and all others approach it more or less. But among confederations and among intervals between sounds, there are several boundaries, and the ratio of the consonances in the latter case, and of the aspects in the former, is at those boundaries alone. If you depart even a little from these boundaries, the whole ratio has at once been lost. For when the sun, for example, has first passed the quartile of Saturn, all activity of nature has been assuaged and ceases for 30 whole days, corresponding in fact with the rays of Saturn and the sun, until the time when the sun comes to the trine of Saturn. Then the weather is again stirred up for a single day and ceases again when that has been crossed. Trine, by the way, is a 120-degree angle. Changes in bodies are not like that, inasmuch as they take up the whole time from start to finish without intermission, but growing with the increase of their cause and with time, and again dwindling with the cause's diminution.
Now, he is generalizing a lot about the effects on the weather systems based upon these different aspects. He clarifies that he's more nuanced than that. I don't know why he's using this absolute language, like this always happens when things are at the quartile or I don't know why he does that choice to speak that way, but he clarifies his position in a few pages. So,
continuing. In a single word, as a line is to number, so the bodily commotions, as commonly known, are to these stimuli of the configurations. Anyone who ponders this carefully will be able to conclude with no difficulty that, like number, sorry, mate, I keep losing my place. Like number, these moments, yeah, no, it's got a lot to do with my eyesight. I'm using different glasses, which is an entity of reason, not of the body, but of the faculties of the soul. And so it must be a soul which is prompted and, as it were, excited by the aspects and stirs up the weather and events in the sky. However, what this soul was, or of what kind, I could chiefly infer from its situation in the world. For the aspects in accordance with which the weather is set in motion are angles between two rays, not angles which are formed at one or other of the planets which face each other, not those which are formed at the sun, very far different in size, but those which are formed here on the earth. And the planets themselves are unaware of the angles which their rays form here at the earth, unless we make them astronomers. It therefore follows that the soul which stirs up the atmosphere according to the prescription of the aspects is here on earth. And since that power which accompanies the aspects is felt throughout the earth's sphere, the soul will be equally broadly distributed. And since the material of rains, winds, clouds, thunder, and shooting stars, which are called forth at the time of aspects, is a humid vapor or spirit, and there is another which is dry and fiery, boiling and steaming out of the earth, for why should the philosopher listen only to Aristotle here, spurning Rudolf Agricola the farmer, or indeed all farmers, and even his own senses, when every day he sees, at the onset of rain, that the summits of the mountains vomit forth a great force of clouds. Therefore, that soul will be not solely on the surface of the earth, but also inside it, in subterranean caverns and in the passages of the mountains. In fact, the globe of the earth will be a body such as that of some animate being, and what its soul is to an animate being, that the sublunary nature which we seek, which sets the weather in motion at the appearance of aspects, will be to the earth. I think he's saying there, of course, that, it's the whole of the earth that's responding. Yeah. And immediately again, these lovely little things that pop into the mind. What's his name? Verdansky.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The biosphere. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in this particular case, the footnotes are perhaps a bit useful because he does bring up a figure who I just Googled a little bit, and Rudolf Agricola looks super interesting as a major educational reformer, real mind of his time that I never even knew about. But the translator writes this figure Agricola of 1443 to 1484, whose Invenzione Dialectica was published in Cologne in 1539, was an educational reformer who contributed to the Renaissance of letters in Germany. Rejecting the authority of Aristotle, he made the transition from the earlier romantic humanism to the scientific humanism of the 15th century. And again, the translator doesn't differentiate between the Enlightenment crap humanism that had no soul and the actual Renaissance humanism, which Kepler and Agricola are obviously leaders of. So keep that lack of ambiguity in mind. And the other one on footnote 77. The translator says, Aristotle does in fact describe two exhalations rising from the earth, one vaporous, the other dry and hot, in his Meteorologica. For Aristotle, however, these exhalations arise when the earth is heated by the sun, the implication being that they originate on the surface. Kepler and Rudolf Agricola, on the other hand, locate the origin of the exhalations in the interior of the earth.
And of course, we're living through those excitations right at the moment. I mean, when I consider where I am sitting, I'm looking outside and there is a bit of a haze into the distance, which is coming from Lake Taal, which is north of here. I mean, it's a volcanic plateau, but there's a lake in the middle of it. Nonetheless, there have been eruptions over the last few years, and it's very rare to get two things happening at the same time. A little bit further south here on the same island, the island of Luzon, Mount Mayon is spewing lava, and it's very rare to have both things happening at the same time. Anyway, and I see that such things, volcanic eruptions, are on the rise all around the globe.
So you're getting out of there soon, right?
Look, it's not threatening where I am. It's just noticeable. Yeah, the haze is not so bad. If it was really bad, you wouldn't want to be breathing it all the time. You really wouldn't. But it's not so bad.
I hear you.
Anyway, I'll spend a lot of time in the water, and I'm getting away from a lot of it. Anyway, so here I was greatly encouraged by the very fact which could have frightened off someone else, that is to say, that disturbances in the weather do not always correspond precisely with the aspects, but the earth occasionally seems slack and stubborn. At another time, that is to say, after harsh and long drawn-out configurations, it is aggravated and gives way to vaporings, even when the aspects do not continue. To be sure, the earth is not an animal like a dog, attentive to every nod, but like an ox or an elephant, slow to anger and all the more violent when it has been kindled. As this analogy succeeded, the result was that I pursued it further, comparing the bodies of animate beings with the body of the earth as well. I saw that all the many things which come from the body of an animate being and testify that there is a soul in it also come from the body of the earth. For as the body puts out hairs on the surface of its skin, so the earth puts out plants and trees, and lice are born on them in the former case, caterpillars, cicadas, and various insects and sea monsters in the latter. And as the body displays tears, mucus, and earwax, and also in places lymph from pustules on the face, so the earth displays amber and bitumen. As the bladder pours out urine, so the mountains pour out rivers. As the body produces excrement of sulphurous odor and farts which can even be set on fire. I feel like a teenager reading that one, Matthew.
Yeah, me too.
And earth produces sulfur, subterranean fires, thunder, and lightning. And as blood is generated in the veins of an animate being, and with it sweat, which is thrust outside the body, so in the veins of the earth are generated metals and fossils and rainy vapor. Therefore, just as other animate beings consume food and drink, so the earth must also take some kind of material from definite channels, to brew from it such a multiplicity of substances, because nothing is made from nothing. Now it takes in and absorbs seawater. That is the reason why the sea never overflows from the pouring in of so many rivers. Here you can gather from what has been said above how absurd it is for people to attribute metals to the operation of the sun alone and with no contribution from the earth. I have also replied in my book, On the New Star, to the popular objection that if the earth had a soul, it would seem that it ought to grow and have limbs fitted for motion. For just as it is a body, and accordingly the soul and its faculties correspond, though this soul belongs to the body of the earth, yet this body would not be related to the soul, just as the body of a man is related to his mind, the chief faculty of the soul. If then the earth had had need of supplements, if it needed some provender other than I have stated, as it were from hunting, those functions would also have been entrusted to this soul and suitable instruments given to it. This was the philosophy of Socrates on the point of death in the Phaedo, when he attributed everything to the governing mind, everything to deliberation on that which is best. Thus, if someone were to argue that there are only 4 faculties of the soul, none of which agrees with this earthly soul, and therefore there is not a soul in the earth, then I will tell him to add this 5th faculty to the number, from the same model and the same laws of argument from which those numbering 4 were found. That is to say, in man. However, I was moved to attribute a soul to the earth with all the more confidence by other things which I pressed home in various places throughout my other books, and collected in a package in my Epitome of Copernican Astrology, page 125, especially the fact that the formative faculty is in the bowels of the earth, which, in the manner of a pregnant woman, portrays in cleft stones human affairs which are presented to it from outside, as if it saw them, such as new and unusual appearances of soldiers, monks, priests, kings, and whatever is in men's mouths. That indeed is rather rare, but what is constant is its expression in gems and fossils of the 5 regular geometrical solids, for the work bears witness to the workman. To these, let a follower of Copernicus add the diurnal, perpetual, and extremely regular revolution of the Earth's globe, which he will quite correctly reckon among the functions of this soul. That relates back to the video we saw. Furthermore, there seems to be some sense either of touch or of hearing in the Earth's globe from the argument, which is confirmed by the tradition of a great many provinces, that if anyone struggles up to the peaks of the highest mountains and throws a pebble into the very deep gulfs which they have, from which noises are often stirred up, or into a mountain lake, and they also undoubtedly have no bottom, the weather is stirred up straight away. For similarly, also animals, if someone tickles the tender passages of their ears or noses by inserting something, are seized with horror and shake their heads or rush headlong into flight. Certain regions of the earth also have their own weaknesses and internal upsets in their bowels. For sometimes they overflow with too much moisture, sometimes they are troubled with overloading or incompleteness of digestion, when instead of tempestuous rain, mere winds emerge. Sometimes, as if seized by fever, they exude no moisture but sulphurous exhalations or unwholesome humors. Thus I was right to advise in my book on the New Star, page 173, that all the faculties of digestion, the attractive, the retentive, and the expulsive, should be looked for in it, seeing that these diseases are states of them. What indeed is more like the breathing of terrestrial animals, and particularly that reciprocal action of fish, when they absorb water through the mouth and in turn push it out through their gills, than the wonderful twice-daily ebb and flow of the ocean.
I'm just going to read this. So footnote 82, by fossils, Kepler means minerals, that is, all kinds of bodies extracted from the soil. The term was used in the sense by Georgius Agricola in his De Natura Fossilium, which is a treatise on mineralogy. Got to read Agricola. Doesn't this guy sound amazing? In his Strena Seu de Nive Sexangula, on the six-sided star, Kepler made some contributions to theoretical crystallography by investigating the close packing of spheres and recognizing the relationship of crystalline structures with the regular polyhedra. That was useful.
What is indeed...
Sorry.
We're going to go back a bit. Yeah. What indeed is more like the breathing of terrestrial animals, and particularly the reciprocal action of fish, when they absorb water through the mouth and in turn push it out through their gills, than the wonderful twice-daily ebb and flow of the ocean. Yet it fits in with the motions of the moon in such a way that it seemed probable to me, in the preface to my commentaries on Mars, that the waves are drawn as iron is by a magnet, by a corporeal virtue of the combination of bodies. I also mentioned this recently in the prolegomena to my Ephemerides.
Yeah.
In the passage where I examined the opinion of David, some of the words are a bit obscure letters. David Fabricius.
Sure.
Yet if anyone should maintain that the earth fits in, as it were, the same alternations in their sleeping and waking as those of day and night, I should judge that he ought to be listened to in philosophy and with not unfavorable ears, especially if there were in addition some indication of parts in the depths of the earth which are flexible, which would take the role of lungs or gills. For if they were to have a nature something like that of our atmosphere, which can be condensed and rarefied, there will then be no need for this breathing of a motion of the surface of the earth, that is to say, analogous to the motion of the muscles of the diaphragm in a breathing human body. What more appropriate method indeed could there be for the taking of sea waters into the kitchen, as it were, of metals, except this very one, by means of those constant twice-daily flows? What else are we made to suspect by the wonderful occurrence when a few years before the throng of merchants deserted Antwerp, the ebb and flow deserted the ocean on a certain day and terrified the citizens not a little, but the moon did not desert her course? Of course, the earth itself, being in control of this reciprocal action, although it shares motion of the where am I? Reciprocal action.
Here, although it shares in the natural motion.
Natural motion. restrained one of that day's respirations, just as animate beings sometimes restrain their souls, although the actual motion of the diaphragm is also mingled with the natural one. Yet perhaps we should more correctly have proved that some breathing is necessary to the earth from the presence of a soul than the soul from the breathing. For in the certainty, so to speak, that there is a soul in the earth, let us now come to contemplation of its essence. To be sure, it is not only a light which depends on itself, like that of fires and of sparks, and not on illumination from the sun, which is argued by the fact that it detects the bright rays of the planets in some ways, but it seems plainly to be a sort of flame, that is to say, one which must be fed by breathing or by swallowing, which is argued by the perpetual and sensible subterranean heat of a kind without a soul, which never persists actively in bare matter, but is not even present potentially in things which proceed from the substance of animals and plants, unless it is begotten from soul and forms, which are something fiery. See my Optics, page 25, 26, and 27.
Right. Whence the subterranean heat comes from.
We shall assign this, as it were, material to the soul of the earth. On it indeed has been impressed in place of a form, an image of the divine countenance, along with the ideas both of the circle and all its ratios, and all of its own sensible body as it is in charge of its rule, and so of the whole world in which its body was going to be. For God has with him not only the geometrical patterns, but also the concepts for the creation of all sensible things. I like that sentence. All of these pass at once to souls as the patterns of God for each to take or use. Therefore, there shines forth in the zodiac of the earth a kind of image of the sensible circle of the zodiac, and so of the whole firmament, the bond of sympathy between heavenly and earthly things. And there shine forth in it by far the most brightly the archetypes of all its functions and of all its motions, by means of which it moves its body through some sense. Others have named it a power, but I for preference an activity. For the former is the essence of souls, but this latter, like a kind of flowing of the flame, because the souls have always been compared with themselves internally, as if they were carrying on what they were created to carry out, whether they actively control the instruments of the body or are impeded. God, of course, is activity made substantial, and subsists in this activity to babble in human fashion about the divine, and therefore the essence of the divine image consists in being active, as does a flame in flowing. Thus, if God were not eternally sustaining it by, as it were, irradiating its material, it would suddenly cease and be extinguished. However, for the basic principle of its individual being, not only body is required, which it is in charge of ruling, but also that very material little part of it, which I described previously, distinguishing it from other souls. Individuality. Insofar then as this soul of the zodiac circle, or rather of its center, wields an idea, it also detects which planet is situated at a given time in which degree of the zodiac, and measures the angles of the radiations which meet at the earth. But insofar as from irradiation by the divine essence, it has taken up the geometrical ratios of the circle, and, by comparison of the circle with definite parts of it, the archetypal harmonies, which are not purely geometrically indeed, but introduced by a kind of package, so to speak, of the bright rays, or rather thoroughly implanted by them, and judges that the measure of the angles, which it has already perceived, are in some cases congruent or harmonic, in other cases incongruent, and finally, insofar as the same soul has embraced the ideas of its operations, in respect of every one of which it is, so to speak, an operative circle, it is always conveyed into those of its works, but more remarkably, if three of these circles coincide and combine into one. That is, if the soul is reminded of itself by the aspects and enters into its operations with some loss of restraint. Never indeed will it cease from cooking, never will it cook without smoke and vapor. In fact, fossils are made from the smoke, as arsenic is formed from the smokes of metalworking furnaces, while from the hot vapor, cooled within the stony crust of the earth and condensed into drops, the rivers trickle down to their sources, and from the same vapor being exhaled out over the surface of the earth, breathable air, which during the night had condensed and fallen in dew, is daily renewed. However, although this operation of the earth's soul is perpetual, yet there was need of some amounts in excess to be evaporated, not continuously for the whole of some period of time, but confined to definite days, so that from the abundance of vapors emitted to the outside, the seasonal rains might be supplied, though with some sunny weather interspersed, in order to revive and water the surface of the earth so that fruits and foods for living creatures might spring up from them. Someone might raise as an objection the furthermost parts of Africa and Peru, which are under the equinoctial line, places in which continual rains falls throughout the summer. Where then is the distinction between the aspects and the uninfluential configurations in this case? Where are the alternations of sunshine and storms? And is not the passage of the sun, solitary planet, without reference to configuration with the others, alone responsible for everything? And that not as an entity of reason, but as a natural cause, that is insofar as it sheds heat and warmth on those parts, so that onto the parts so scorched and attenuated moisture is exhaled from the bowels of the earth. I reply that this natural action of the sun is not to be denied, but that it is not peculiar to the tropical zone alone, but can also be observed among us. For when the sun passes over our hemisphere in summertime, rainstorms generally fall, which are more abundant than the snow usually is in wintertime in the absence of the sun. However, the rise which we have in the rivers when the snows melt, though they do not seem to rise as much when the rainstorms fall, certainly not by such daily increases, is partly due to the fact that the snows fall little by little, and individual layers of them accumulate and are preserved in storage for many months by the force of the cold. Whereas the summer rainstorms, even when they are very extensive, are for the most part at once soaked up by the earth, which is drying in the sun. And boy, can I vouch for that living in a tropical country. Pause for half an hour, absolutely torrential rain, and half an hour later, everything's dry again.
Huh.
However, it is partly due to the fact that the snow in the Alps cannot be dispersed except by very abundant summer rainstorms, so that in this way the continual rises in the rivers are not due to the snows alone, but to a combination with the rainstorms also. Hence, if you weigh it all up, a greater abundance of moisture is often exuded in summertime, even among us, than in winter. The objection therefore demands that there should be a coincidence of heavenly causes, of which one is natural, the heat of the sun, the other rational, an aspect, and that there should be a coincidence of sublunary causes, so that not only does one zone have more moisture than another, but also in the same climate, one region should have more than another from their own causes. Sometimes, even in the tropical zone, it can rain more at the time of aspects than on days which are empty of aspects. However, that this determination of the character of the earth's soul, which I have stated in the second place, was produced by the sensible zodiac, and indeed by the whole sphere of the fixed stars, is also confirmed by the following. At the great coincidence of all periods, it is established that, if some novelty is found in the heaven, whether in accordance with the ordinary course of the heaven, such as the rarer conjunctions of several stars, and as the more remarkable eclipses of the luminous bodies, or outside their ordinary nature, such as comets or new fixed stars, at the same time, sublunary nature is perturbed by unusual influences, so that there is an immense and continual violence of rain, beyond that indicated by the aspects, or on the contrary, drought and harshness, and associated earthquakes. And lastly, there is unaccustomed dampness in the air, which brings pestilential catarrhs and other epidemic plagues, particularly on those places from which they are exhaled and with greater force, or to which they are carried by more frequent winds. Mm-hmm. That there is also, in fact, something similar to the memory of animals in this soul, I have reported in my book On the New Star, chapter 10, page 44. For this is the nature of all things which are akin to light, that they are excited by the light of the sun, or at least of day, and taken on some disposition which may last for a certain time. Thus, in the case of the eyes, the visual spirits, the offspring of light, impressed by the unexpected sight of the sun, wherever the eyes are turned, shows and proclaim this image even unwillingly. Thus, among the secrets of chemists is the following wonderful and outstandingly noteworthy observation. They produce gems, as I have just now heard from an eyewitness, which are invisible in the darkness like other things deprived of light. Yet if someone exposes them to daylight alone, they are set on fire by it like candles, and take a gleam with them even unto the darkness, shining like the eyes of cats. But it is again extinguished in a short time. Something like that happens with this soul, which I have stated to be akin to light and fire, so that on the side, for which it is a point and has different sides, or a potential zodiac circle, on which there has been a meeting of superior planets, or an eclipse. Whoops.
Sorry.
Eclipse.
Okay.
Has appeared, it takes on the character of a conjunction, which may last for a certain time.
Hey, just
Thus,
quick, is he referring here to like fluorescent stones or something? Or
I'm pretty sure that's what he's talking about.
Huh.
And I'm immediately reminded of various theories as how so many of the underground Egyptian tombs that have been discovered with all sorts of drawings all over the walls, there's absolutely nothing on the ceiling that suggests they were using illumination via fire or oil or whatever. And the general consensus amongst, let's call them alternative researchers, is that somehow there were crystals that were capable of doing this.
Or maybe it's crystals like glass. You could see through them in the daylight,
Yep.
so they could be perhaps invisible, and maybe when light's shining on it a different way, that's when you can see them.
Yep.
Like, he could be referring to that instead of something like phosphorescent.
It sounds like when the sun's absorbed into this, whatever this is, it causes it to glow for a little while. I don't know.
Yep.
That's
Yeah, look, it is a property of crystals. The crystals have really interesting properties, let me tell you. Anyway, something like that happens with this soul, which I have stated to be akin to light and fire, so that on the side, for it is a point which has different sides, or a potential zodiac circle on which there has been a meeting of superior planets or an eclipse has appeared. Sorry, I'm reading what I've already read, never mind. It takes on the character of a conjunction, which may last for a certain time. Thus, whenever one of the planets, especially the sun or moon, passes the place, it exerts such force as it would exert at the actual stimulation of a conjunction. The whole of this business, I say, is like the memory of animals. Interesting. For I carry about in my mind the likeness of a man whom I have once seen, and yet do not have him always present in my thoughts, but when he or someone like him appears, then that original likeness is elicited afresh and established in my actual thought by recollection. We read something similar in the Plato readings.
Yes, we did.
However, the memory of man is more noble in this respect, that I am reminded of what is in my memory, not only when it is met externally, but I remind myself of it as often as I wish, because, of course, the faculty of reflection is present in man, which this soul lacks. Yet these things will be more evident in the contemplation of the human soul. Now, one difficulty, which was also touched on above, but lightly, must be removed, that of the way and means of reception. For the reception by us men of the likenesses of sensible things within our souls seems something acceptable and plain. For the apertures of the pupils by which they enter are in the open. The eye is that which forms the likeness. The crystalline fluid is that which controls the radiant beam. That's something worth noting too, that the fluid within your eye is crystalline fluid. The net-like covering of the optic nerve is that which receives the picture of external things. Nothing of that sort is apparent in the body of the earth. No eye is here by which the soul of the earth may see the radiations of the planets and their angles. How then will it sense the light without vision? How will it perceive or receive the angles without an instrument? There is some difficulty, I confess, but if you consider the matter more deeply, it is common to both cases. go to page 169 of my astronomical part of optics. You will see the old complaint about human vision as well. For although the more careful opticians and medical anatomists confess in that passage, I have at last very firmly demonstrated the way of seeing after so many fruitless attempts by others, though Francis Aquilonius, whose great work on optics came out 4 years ago, has not seen my book, and so has to no purpose erected a new exceedingly splendid structure on the old era about the way of vision. Yet that way of seeing does not extend beyond the net-like covering, where the fluids of the eye are transparent. There still remains the question, not yet settled by the natural philosophers to whom I have appealed, how the picture of the thing which is to be seen, formed according to me on the net-like covering, is from thereon received through the opacity of the body within the recesses of the soul. And the fact that we receive it in reverse image and then turn it around in our mind, that's another interesting aspect. Does the soul proceed outwards to meet it? And what hangs on that? I, however, as I frankly confess, concentrate more on vision than on this perception of the angle of the rays. About that, I think I am capable of some by no means inept babbling, although I am completely dumb on it. I could indeed, that's an honest statement, isn't it? I could indeed, without losing the main point, evade the toils of speculation and reply to the question, by what eyes the soul of the earth sees the rays of the stars. By the same by which it saw the soldier with jagged boots, whose image it implanted in the cleft stone. However, laziness is the death of philosophy. Let us live and exert ourselves. First, the soul has actually acquired the nature of a point, at least for the purposes of binding it to its body, potentially the shape of a circle. And as it is activity, it spreads itself from that seat at a point into a circle. For whether it has to sense external things, and they surround it in a spherical way, or whether it has to control its body, and it also has its body surrounding it, itself it is concealed inside, rooted in its particular point, from which it comes out by means of its emanation to the rest of its body. But how does it come out, except along straight lines? For that is truly coming out. How would it have any other manner of coming out, existing as light and flame, than other lights coming out of their sources, that is, on straight lines? It proceeds out then toward the outer parts of its body according to the same laws as the lights which surround the firmament proceed in towards it as it resides at its point. Now, the whole surface of half the Earth's globe, and so all points on the surface of the atmosphere by which it is clothed, are irradiated by an infinity of rays from one and the same planet. And all of them, a single one is directed towards that point which is the seat of the soul. On the other hand, the souls come out to all points on the surface of its body by an infinity of lines, like the rays of the sun, because it is itself a kind of light. And the spirits commonly spoken of seem to be nothing else but these rectilinear rays and these emanations of the soul.
Hey,
Yet there is one.
Paul,
Yep.
I hate to break your flow, but my flu is getting the best of me, and I almost passed out just now.
Listen,
I'm
Matthew,
fearing.
Matthew, I'm very. People around me the last few days have been getting very sick.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay,
cosmic
so-
radiation. I think we're
whatever it is,
Yeah.
I'm amenable. If you want to end things because it's becoming too hard for you, I'm almost getting to the end of my voice too. And as I've said, the glasses I'm using and even the screen I'm
Well,
looking at.
you are an excellent reader. I really enjoyed your reading, and I think people listening on YouTube are going to really enjoy it as well.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm trying very hard to be as coherent as I possibly can be.
But it's
just when you scroll up and down, I suddenly lose my place, and it takes me a second to focus and find the words I'm looking for.
That. Yeah,
That's not your fault. That's different circumstances, different glasses, different space.
But it's a fun idea though. Like, I mean, the concept of Earth and planetary soul is the way he's developing it. I was always kind of repulsed because I saw sort of the lazy-minded, new agey Gaia cult that treated the idea of the Earth soul and the planetary souls in a very specifically ugly way for political agendas that repulsed me. And part of it is that they treat all souls as equal, and that we're like we shouldn't be building technology or infrastructure or dams or cutting down trees at all because we're like raping Gaia, Earth Mother, who's crying every time we cut down a tree. And so, you got this ideological baggage with that idea that all souls are equal. But Kepler is not saying that. He is saying that there is something that must be sensing in some way the qualities of these aspects that then generate effects that are measurable, even if it's not of the same nature as the higher living species. It's still there. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen.
The process might be the same, but it's different for all of the celestial bodies. And of course, his focus is on Earth, which is where we're perceiving it all from. So,
yeah.
And I have to say, Matthew, maybe because of my background in history, I'm not steeped in theology. When I read the word soul in these readings, I'm not thinking of it in the religious sense.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's an analogy. The religious idea is a good analogy for it, but that's not what I'm hearing when I'm reading, the word soul in Kepler's writings, or even in Plato's writings, even in the stuff we've read before. I'm thinking of it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Maybe Quan could talk about that a little bit more.
Like the core being.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Kelly, I don't want to interrupt you. Do you have something else to say?
No.
Okay. What I was going to say that, yes, Paul, it's an invitation that I accept gladly, because here I think that the word soul you have to understand the word soul here as a mode of sensibility, as a mode of communication. And precisely what is special with Kepler is that he used the word mind as something higher than soul, because the understanding of the word mind nowadays is almost equivalent to intellect, meaning the wording and the imaging capacity, the conceptual capacity. And here, Kepler is using the word mind in a very high meaning. And I tend to agree that we have to understand soul at the basic meaning of mode of sensibility of communication with the environment.
Yeah. It's, to me at least, and as I said, maybe because I don't have a strong theological background, I don't equate the use of the word soul here as something that I would hear a Catholic priest talk about.
Well, let's not forget that he was, after all, a man of the 16th and of the 17th century, and he must be close. He was speaking Latin, of course, and after all, soul is animus and anima in Latin. Okay, and in animus and anima, the basic idea was something moving, something having the capacity to interact in a sensible, by different mode of sensitivities with the environment, much more than the higher meaning of philosophy, if you want.
There's the whole different use of language. It's another one of the things that's so much fun to read these sorts of things. As I'm reading along, it's like, wow, that's that sentence just makes so much sense because it is literally spelled out. Every aspect of the meaning of what he's trying to get at is spelled out in the sentence in a way that we kind of lost in the 20th century, 21st century, I think.
Yes, and mind.
Not entirely, but to a large degree, yeah.
Yes, and let's not forget that mind comes from Sanskrit manas, from Greek metron, and from Latin meter, and meanings the capacity to measure. Okay, and here you have a hierarchy of measurements, because you can start with the measure of the angles of an aspect, or you can measure in a more cosmic manner or by a cosmic understanding with the idea, with the higher forms in the sense of Plato. So I realized that after all, by using soul for the inferior faculties and by using the word mind for the highest center of the soul, Kepler, as we expect, of course, because once again he was a man of the 16th and 17th century, was much more closer to the etymology of the words in Latin and in Greek. Okay, which is not a surprise. Okay, a man of the 17th century knew much more Greek and Latin than us, of course.
Yep, universities taught that all the time. Yes, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I liked about what he was saying too, that in relation to the influence of aspects on weather, rain, and he gave an explanation as to why certain places of the planet don't necessarily correspond to a simple model that applies to the whole planet. He's also commenting on the fact that sometimes the Earth doesn't respond to these aspects at all. Almost like it has a freedom of choice. And the suggestion,
he compared it to like a stubborn elephant or something, like a stubborn beast.
Yeah, exactly. Once energized, it comes on, full on. But the point there is, what he's really stating is that whilst I have an understanding of the correlation between aspects and certain weather events, there are forces in the solar system and from the galaxy that at times overrides all of that. It means that the usual responses to aspects and geometric relationships within the solar system are overridden by things coming from a larger scale. And the whole of climate change, the warming of the planet right now is accompanied by the warming of every celestial body in the solar system. And the best answer to why that is happening is because we happen to be in a relationship with the center of the galaxy that allows more cosmic rays to come in at the moment. We're not being shielded from some of those cosmic rays the way we are for much of the time. And that is as good an explanation as to why things are heating up as anything to do with anthropomorphic global warming.
We're very shielded here in North Florida. They're doing something to the sky. It's very white. So
yeah, well, sadly, they may have been doing that for a very long time.
It's getting worse, though. It's seriously more than just the trails.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how the Earth's soul must feel.
Ready to explode, I would suspect.
Yeah, pretty bad.
Well, ready to oppose. I don't want to say explode. That sounds too catastrophic. But ready to oppose, however that might be done.
Or maybe simply in interaction with its present environment. Because after all, at the center of the Earth, you have a core of metal, and that core of metal is precisely the engine of energy interacting with these more superficial layers. I don't think that.
I don't think it's a metal core, isn't it? Plasma.
No, well, it's infusion, of course, but
we have no idea. Let's just be honest. We have no clue.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll step back.
Well,
sorry.
We make a big hole, but it's not deep enough.
I think the Chinese are trying to build the biggest hole right now in
exactly. But I think
it's they're going down like.
But it's not deep enough for now.
No, it's not even going to pierce the crust, even close.
Yeah, no, but I would say that we should not attribute too much importance to the human activities compared to the very dynamic interactions of the different layers of the Earth.
And also with the sun.
Yeah, precisely the big elephant, using Kepler's words.
Awesome.
Keep a stiff upper lip. Is that what you're trying to say?
What did you say? I did not hear.
Keep a stiff upper lip.
Is that what you're trying to say?
The universe will wash away these negligible little mosquitoes with their harp and crap. Well,
yeah. Well, as I saw clips the other day that most people would not be capable to give the exact proportion of CO2 in the natural atmosphere, and they would buy a narrative putting the responsibility on CO2.
Yeah,
which is a very small number, the proportion of CO2 in the atmosphere.
Yeah, fraction of a fraction.
Yeah,
and there's also something in the elements that is incrementable with the emanations of the sun and of the guys used to put it the galaxy, the center of the galaxy. I mean, so there's that aspect as well. I don't know. I'm trying to fit all this together.
We all are.
Yeah.
We all are.
Yeah. Well, to come back to the beginning of the presentation, it was precisely the idea of the simple cause and effect relationship, or the cause and effect of the mover, and the moving. And once again, okay, I know I'm a little bit obsessed by LaRouche sentence, but it's so perfect. Okay, substance is effective cause, and effective cause is substance. It's exactly at the center of the idea of mover, moved, and moving. And because of that triune relation, if you want, you don't have to imagine a mover which is completely outside its own cosmos. Okay, I think that's the originality of the idea, one of the originalities of that overarching idea with a capital I or capital E, if you use the Greek word eidos for form, or God's plan, if you want. Okay, because once again, cosmos means God's plan and not the physical universe, which is only the outside manifestation of that plan.
That's a beautiful way, I think, to end the this session tonight. That's a good universal thought. So look,
before we go, can I make one quick little comment?
Yes.
Very superficial, I know, but I love your shirt, Quan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Paul, a man loving dragons cannot be entirely bad. That's for sure.
In this part of the world, again, coming from Australia, we don't see dragon T-shirts and things like that and such decorative pictures on. We see advertising crap, my favorite band or whatever. But you move to a place like the Philippines, and I have shirts like that, for goodness sake. But when I first started seeing them, it's like, wow, this is fantastic and very interesting iconography.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And throughout the whole region, I haven't traveled that much in Southeast Asia, but a few places. And what intrigued me when I first went to many of these places was just how many dragon statues that you would find throughout the entirety of the region. And you go, why is that such a big thing in these cultures? You don't see dragon throughout the British monarchy, for example, in the representation of that in Australia, where I come from, in Melbourne. You're not going to get too many.
You're not going towards shape-shifting lizard people, are you there, Paul?
No, I'm not. But whether look at the Thunderbolts project, for example, and David Talbot. He's suggesting that dragons are nothing more than physical representations of electrical manifestations in the sky. He may be right.
Yeah,
but it's the prevalence of it in this part of the world that suddenly becomes it's,
I think it's
striking.
There is that, but there's also the form that they for instance, a hyperbolate or something, they also have that form too.
But it's not like dragons don't feature in Western philosophy or history or whatever. St. Michael slaying the dragon. There are any number of emblems of various family houses that have the image of a dragon, but there's not an awful lot of literature associated with it.
Yeah,
there are some stories, but it's not a predominant theme in Western culture, at least not when I was growing up in Melbourne. It's not predominant visual.
To the lizard people. No, just kidding.
Well, as I said, it may be representations of electrical phenomena. I'm not going to dismiss the lizard people out of hand because it's fun to listen to that.
Who knows?
It's just fun to listen to it sometimes.
Who knows?
Yeah, but it's related to what we discuss tonight and every night, every Wednesday's night. It's a symbol of spirituality and power, but power under the guidance of spirituality.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
All right. So what I did, I just popped in a couple of links for fun homework if people want to do it. There's 2 videos. One is the lecture on the expanding Earth that we hosted a few weeks back. Really good video, which I think after what we're listening to today is going to take on even new life and new meaning. And yeah, I'm totally persuaded the Earth is absolutely expanding, as are all of the planets and planetary bodies in every solar system. I'm on board. So that video is a really good one. And another one is on the cloud mystery, featuring the incredible work of a Danish scientist named Heinrich Svensmark. And if people haven't watched that, it's 52 minutes long, and it is devastatingly good. It just demonstrates the direct correlation between cosmic rays, magnetic fields, and climate change, and specifically the creation of clouds that are the primary driver in moderating or shaping climate, not CO2. And it's just such a good movie. And again, plays right into what we've just been reading.
Could you post that in the Kepler group on Telegram?
Yes, I can do that, and in the description box of this video too when it goes on YouTube.
Yeah. Good idea there. Posting it in the Kepler group means it's immediately accessible rather than having to wait for the YouTube upload of this session. Yeah. So
I just keep opening the windows real quick.
Good idea, Kelly.
What was that, Helen?
I said I just keep opening the windows real quick to make sure that I have it so that I can look at it.
Yeah, that's very efficient. That's very efficient.
I would if I was at home, but I'm using a laptop. It's just going to be easier if I can hit it through the Kepler group, because I can open it at home and immediately go to it. Yeah. So thank you for that, Kelly. That was a useful suggestion. Get better, Matthew.
Always edifying. All right, till the next one.
Get better. Yeah. Look, take time out to sustain the body, mate.
Never.
Yeah, take some time out.
Never. I am soul and mind, not body. Blah.
Whatever, but take some time out to make sure that you look after yourself, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. Now tomorrow's my day off. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Bye,
guys.
Bye, folks. Catch you next week.
Bye now.